Hey everyone, welcome back to Spiritual Resilience. I'm Tana,
I'm Bruce.
and thanks for being open and willing to connect with us again. This time, I want to tell a little story about a cruise my husband and I took, gosh, several years ago.
Where'd you
And
go?
thanks for asking, Bruce. We flew over to Hawaii and then got on a cruise ship to cruise around the islands for 8 glorious days. It was my first time to Hawaii at that point, and we were just going as a couple with my husband's side of the family. All of the siblings were going with their significant others and with his mother and father. And my goodness, it was all so exciting. And we went into that massive, massive sea of people as you go through endless lines, checking here and going there and doing all the things to get your stuff ready to be able to get on the ship. And then I remember walking out of that building and seeing that ship. Now, my father, your grandfather, Bruce, served in the Navy in World War II.
Mm-hmm.
And he would tell us just legendary stories about big old ships and all that stuff at the time. And so, I had pictures in my mind of what a large ship might look like. Yeah, whatever. I walked out of that building and I saw that ship, which let's just call it what it is. It was a floating city on the water, eclipsing, I felt like, the whole island of Oahu that we were on. Okay, so it wasn't that big, but it felt that big. And I just remember just this amazement I felt as we boarded the ship and got ready for this adventure that I had no idea what it was going to be like, right? And so we find our cabin, and oh my word, it was tiny. Do the little, the little tour, which is turn around and face this way and then turn and face that way, and then turn all the way around and open that tiny little door and see the tiny little bathroom. But you know what? Who cares? It was so exciting. And so we moved in, unpacked all the things, and enjoyed so much, the little folded towels that are on your bed and stuff. And then we went to dinner, and we had a reserved time, and so we all went to the formal dining room, and we were all there together at the same table. It was this huge round table, and we sat down, and you have a menu, and what you can order all the things if you want. You can order whatever the heck you want. And we're just like, what? Hold the phone, right? We were like, wow, this is cool. So we order our dinner, we're waiting for it, and the boat starts to rock a little, and you hear, the engines they're powering, and you realize you're moving, and we're moving out of the little bay there, the port, and out into the ocean. And I'm like, wow, I wonder what it's going to be like. I wonder if I'll be able to handle it. Am I going to get seasick? All the things. And so, because my husband and I had booked late, we were way up on the 11th floor out of 13 floors. And so we could just, pop up on the very top deck and just see all the gorgeous ocean and the moonlight sparkling off it. And I found out right away that I was not seasick. I love the motion of water. I wondered if I could handle open sea water, but on a big floating city, yes, indeed, I could. And so we set off on our adventure. And I just have to just share with you that the next morning we walked into the it's called and it's where you have lots of food, and it's called
Buffet.
buffet. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So we walked into the buffet for breakfast, and they had poached eggs. Oh my gosh, you guys, it's like nirvana, right? Eggs can get on my plate any way that they want to, and I will love them. But poached in gently, almost simmering water, it's just the best. It's the best. So I'm like, oh, poached eggs, and I'm scooping them up, right? And then on the way out, we're like, look, there's an ice cream thing. What if we grabbed an ice cream cone and just walked out with it? Okay, so I know you guys are making fun of me now, but remember, this was our first cruise. We were unaccustomed. So we grabbed our little ice cream cone and we walked out of there. And I got to tell you, man, that is wild abandon. I just walked out. I'm not paying anybody. It was so cool. So we set off on our adventure. We would go to sleep, heading out to deep water, and we would wake up the next day at another island, ready to get off and go explore. And oh my gosh, it was just so much fun. I just cannot recommend it enough. So I think it was the second day, second or third. Anyway, it was towards the beginning. We went to the big island of Hawaii, and we were parked to go enjoy a little town called Kona. And it was so shallow there, the ocean was so shallow there, that that big behemoth of a ship could not get in to dock anywhere. So it just parked out in the ocean. And they ferried us into Kona. Well, we had just the most delicious day, snorkeling for the first time in our lives. Yes, we may have swallowed some seawater because we forgot you can't turn your head to look at each other. But anyway, we saw sea turtles, we saw pufferfish, we saw so many fish, and just had a ball. Oh my word, it was so fun. And then we went back into town from that little bay we were at, and we were waiting to get ferried back out onto our ship. And we were just sitting on the beach, and we were watching the spinner dolphins because, they're nowhere else. They're just there. And they jump in the air and spin and then go back into the water. So we were watching them just going, wow, that is so cool. And I realized out in the distance, I'm looking at the ship, right? And it's just caught my interest. And I'm scanning it. I'm like, where are the anchor chains? Because I knew from my dad, that a big old ship has just massive chains, like just, so big that I wouldn't be able to carry a couple of links of it. But I'm looking for these chains, coming out from the ship and going down to anchor. And I don't see them anywhere. And I'm like, honey, do you see any anchor chains? And he's like, no, I don't. So we puzzled over that. And then here was our ferry. So we got on it. We went back. I was so curious that as soon as we got on the ship, I asked one of the crewmen, I said, where are the anchor chains? And he's like, we don't use anchors. And I'm like, oh, what? And he said, yeah, we don't use anchors anymore. We just set a coordinate from the GPS, and then the engines stay on, and they are talking with the computer all day long and, doing whatever the engines need to do to keep the ship in that little square of GPS that they've given it. And I was just stunned. I was like, wow, that's phenomenal to me. And over the years, it still speaks to me. And over the years, I've, come up with a few little things. I know this is going to shock you, but it was a beautiful metaphor. And so I want us to talk about 4 kind of delicious things that I learned from that experience.
Well, first, before we get
So,
into that, I just wanted to kind of say that the ships that you're referring to that Grandpa was on, they were the Liberty ships, right? And those are the
yes.
ones with the great big anchor chains. So if anybody wants to look up what you're referencing that Grandpa saw, I think it's what is the one in California? Didn't you go out to go see that?
It was the O'Brien.
The O'Brien. Okay.
Yeah.
Anywho,
Anywho. And yeah. So anyway, so the first thing that I thought, and we're going, because it was a ship, we're going to talk about relationships. Yes, I went there. And that is exactly how dorky I am. So I want us to talk about relationships tonight as it, you know, has to do with our spiritual resilience tool bag. And I want us to consider that in our relationships, there are coordinates that will hold a relationship in a workable space, right? And the coordinate has to be something that is entered in to each person that's in the relationship. And it matters. And because if the relationship is just left on the open sea to float about willy-nilly, it's going to float away. And so we need to keep anchored to the right spot, which we get through that relationship coordinate that
so
holds that relationship.
if I understand what you're saying is these coordinates are agreements, whether spoken or unspoken, because
Yes, they're the things that are going to keep that relationship healthy. Now, are my coordinates going to be your coordinates? No. I mean, good coordinates will always overlap to some degree, but each relationship is a living, breathing entity unto itself. And it will have its living, breathing coordinate that will keep it together and keep it healthy and
and
keep
off the
it well.
rocks.
Yes, and off the rocks. Excellent. Okay, so love that one. Okay, so I'm peeking over at my other monitor here. It's got my points written on it so that I could pretend that I remember them of my own. Um, the second point that I wanted to make is that there are relationship engines and they need to be on and they need to be serviceable and they need to be engaged with the coordinate that our relationship needs. And they need to be in communication with that coordinate so that if it needs to move any direction at any time, it's able to do that quickly and with grace and ease. And doing that will allow for our relationship to stay where it needs to be. So if you were thinking about relationship engines, Bruce, what would come to your mind?
Well, when you started talking about that, the thing that came to my mind is what I'm hearing you say is that we need to be listening, first of all, to hear what's the need is and responsive. And I think it's kind of a two sided controller and engine type deal where the controlling part is what the engine needs to do on the other side and vice versa. So it's not just that you're controlling your engine, you need to be able to listen and react to what the other engine is doing to keep you there.
I like it. See, I knew that you would bring this male engine-y kind of view to it, and that's valuable. I appreciate it. So I think of things like forgiveness, compassion, work, play, um, belief in, trust, courage, those kinds of things.
On your former point with the coordinates,
Yeah.
one thing that I've heard spoken by a couple people, but one in particular, Valen, was the first one to kind of put a hammer on it and just said, everybody's okay with upfront. And like I said, I don't think all agreements are outspoken, but I think some of the best ones are, because it's really hard to telekinetically get those agreements. And sometimes, even if we think there is an agreement, the terms aren't the same.
Yes, and that's going to be my point number 4. We'll come
Oh,
back
okay.
to that, Bruce. Well done. Well spotted.
I was just
Um,
going to say that to that point is wherever the coordinates are, I think they need to be upfront as much as
right.
possible.
Absolutely. I mean, it needs to be consciously understood and consciously guarded, right? Consciously addressed. We can't just leave it to the winds of fate if we want it to be healthy. That's like having an animal, a little puppy, and saying, I'd really like for you to feel full and fed. And then that's it.
Yeah.
That I mean, obviously we giggle because that would be ridiculous. That you could totally see that's not going to work. And yet, sometimes we'll enter a relationship and say, I would like this relationship to be happy and fulfilling.
Yes.
And that's the thought that's given and the work that's put in. And I'm not, making fun of us. I'm saying that honestly, we really can catch ourselves that seriously lacking sometimes in the conscious effort that all of this takes. Relationships, again, are living organisms unto themselves, and we must care for them and engage with them. So along with that, I wanted to bring up the third point, which is, and I found this very, very compelling to me, because in, say, my marriage relationship, my husband is very different than I am. Like, very different than I am. He's a goer. I don't go as much. He's a doer. I'm a thinker. He's a joker. I'm serious. You know what I mean? We're just very different. And so another thing I saw in this coordinate program is that there's a little play in there, right? The coordinate is not, here's one number, you have to stay over this number, right? It's a grid. It's a little grid square in which that ship needs to be kept. So it can move around. It has a little freedom of movement. And so in a relationship, that spoke to me about our individuality, that we're not all the same. We don't grow and think and do and become and experience the same. There is room for play in those things within a relationship, within that relationship coordinate. There's room for play. We are not all expected to be the same and in the same place and doing the same. There's room for each person to be themselves, to learn and to grow, to have different experiences, and still be within the coordinates, still be within that space that will hold and bless that relationship, right?
Yeah,
And keep it healthy.
I think too that we have to be willing to give. I was thinking this on a personal level, but being able to give the grace, like you're saying, you have to be able to recognize that what your partner needs in that relationship or the other party of the relationship. You might have a predefined area in your mind of how it's going to go. And sometimes it might drift outside that, and you're thinking, hey, that's not what I was expecting to happen. But you have to be willing to talk and find out why that's happening, what the circumstances are. And on the personal side, what I was thinking is that we've got to be able to give ourselves that fence and also do it in terms of what's going on. Because I know that I get trapped in my own head, and I think, like, well, I don't know what other people think. But in my head, when the water's calm and there's not much current, there's not much wind, you can hold a really tight spot. And you get to the point where you think, yeah, I can sit right on this mark and not go outside of it. But when, winds kick up, you get rough currents, you get big waves and rough seas, then sometimes you got to give yourself a little break if you're not sitting on a dime.
Yes.
If you start going off and you have to come back, then, you know, I think one of the things you have to do is just roll with it, you know, to do another punny joke, because it's going to get rocking. And you've got to be able to expand those boundaries for a minute and give yourself some grace and others around you too.
I love that. Thank you. And while you were talking, it brought up just the example to me, because I worked for 8 years in the NICU as a family support specialist, because I had gone through 2 NICU journeys myself, right? And so March Dimes hired me to be a family support specialist. And it was fascinating to me, the healing journey of my own experiences that was, as I walked with others on theirs. Because what I learned is that statistically, when there is a traumatic experience in a relationship, and in this case, we were talking about couples, that 80% of them fail. That's a staggering statistic to me.
Yeah.
And what I learned in working with people over those 8 years is that we're in our relationship, and we're sailing along, and we've worked out our choreography with each other, and that's how it is. And it becomes very subconscious, right? It just kind of plays in the background. We're not really conscious of it. It's just doing its job. And then some hard, terrible thing happens, and all of a sudden that choreography does no longer serve. It doesn't serve. And in fact, we often just forget what our dance even was, because our breath has been sucked out of us. We can't think, we can't process. We barely have enough life energy to live, and none to spare beyond just breathing. And how are you supposed to navigate a complex relationship in those circumstances? And so I loved what you said, Bruce, when you said sometimes you have to widen the coordinate, right? You've got to give yourself some room to be able to ride those waves without being untrue to the coordinate of the relationship. And what I saw is that we process things so differently. And I'm talking at this point now between, and this is just a generalization, all you folks, so don't be upset by it. But I'm just talking about generally how males and females in these situations process. And I saw over and over and over again the mom who has just been denied her pregnancy that she fully expected to still be experiencing in that time, in that moment, is stressed out and scared to death and suffering massive loss because that baby is no longer growing safely inside of her. And she is guilty because surely she's done something wrong. I never met a NICU mom that was not guilty because surely she did something wrong that made that baby be born too early. And she is completely and utterly wrapped up in this child's survival. For all intents and purposes, she's laying in that isolette right by that baby. And the husband on the other hand, is typically in that moment pulling himself up as solid as he can make himself, because he's looking at his wife going, if we are to survive this, I must be the rock. And so he emotionally becomes stoic. And the wives, I cannot tell you how many times this happened. The wives would say to the husbands, don't you love our baby? What's wrong with you? Why aren't you crying? Why aren't you upset? And there would just, this wedge would come into that relationship. And with each incident like that, it would just get tamped in farther and farther. And you could just see them begin to split. And I would just pull them into a room and say, oh, my dear friends, I love you so much. And could I just point out to you what's going on? And I share with them the story of me getting through as an absolute emotional wreck and Trent being my rock. And that was on our first NICU baby. 2 years after he was born, we're watching a show. It's about a baby being born early and whisked away into the operating room. And the dad standing out in the hall crying because he's like, I don't know what's going on in there. I don't know if my wife's okay. I don't know if my baby's alive. I don't know. And he's an emotional mess. And I'm crying, because I do. It's what I do. And so I'm blubbering, and I look over to see my husband, who is not on the couch beside me. He's on the floor in the fetal position, sobbing his guts out. It took him 2 years to feel safe enough in my survival and our baby's survival to be able to have his emotional response. Now, my friends, if we can't allow play in our coordinate for those kinds of variables in our relationship, and that applies to any situation in a relationship that wants to drive a wedge, then we're going to have trouble. We have to allow, and I'm so grateful that there is built into the coordinate an allowance for us to experience differently. And within that allowance that's built into the coordinate, I beg us and plead with us to be willing to allow that to each other. It's essential. And it's going to work, and it feels vulnerable and tenuous. And I believe that we will find that in the long run, and maybe it's a few years, we'll find out that it worked. If we can stay the course with the coordinate. Did that make any sense?
Yeah. Just when you were talking about that, I've just come to have this theory, and I guess it's not a theory, but this point of listening is when you're talking to somebody. I don't even know how much this applies to the situation that you're describing, because at that point, at the initial onslaught, it's really, like you said, hard to respond or hear or anything. But just in my experience, like I said, with technical equipment and things, a lot of times people don't know what's wrong, but they know something is wrong, and it's wrong enough that they're bringing it to your attention. And so, as a tech, a lot of times it's much easier to say, no, I know what's going on. That can't be wrong. That's not how that works. And so in our worlds, in our time, when everything is breaking down and we're looking at everything from our point of view and our perspective, I just think it's really easy to take what somebody is saying and say, no, that's not how I'm feeling. That's not what you need. What you need is this. And this is how we're feeling. But I think sometimes we have to be able to pull in and just say, out of all the things that are wrong and all of the things that are going on, my spouse, my significant other, the other person in the relationship is bringing this one thing up. And a couple things that I think you can ask yourself is, do they typically ask this type of favor? Do they ask for this thing to happen? Is this normal behavior? Do they normally say they're in this much pain? Do they normally say, I can't deal with this? Or is it something that's out of the ordinary? Because if it is, then I think it needs to be something that's flagged in your mind as something that's important, and like you said, something that needs to have a little more grace given to it and be able to pull in that direction without just putting a foot down and saying, no, that's not what's going on. I know what's wrong with you. I think another test, and you can correct me if I'm wrong because I'm by no means an expert, but I guess there's a difference between being, I guess like in math, like a vector. If you're sitting right on the exact point and it's perfect, but you're pointed straight off the other direction, then it looks like you're in the right place, but you're going the wrong way. And when things go sideways, I think it's the opposite, where you're not on point, but you're still pointed the right way and you're still trying to keep going. And I think we need to be able to assign a lot of value to that in ourselves and in whoever's going through this journey with us, is where's the boat pointed? Because a lot of times we just look at somebody and say, you're not on point. And I think that happens a lot. But I think something that's not given is the full course. It's like the snapshot versus the video. Are you taking that one brief moment in time and judging somebody by where they're at that exact moment, or are you taking into account their vector, which way they're going, which way they're heading, what they're trying to accomplish? Because I think that speaks volumes for what's going on. Because I know in some instances, when things get bad, you're put up with hard choices. Do I keep going with this and pray that it works out in 2 years? Or am I cutting loose? And like you said, it's really, to have something come out 2 years later, that's hard. That's a lot of working together and trying to hold things together to make it through something to see how it pans out. That's not something that is just an overnight thing or an instant fix or even just one special moment. That's 2 years of standing by someone, having faith in them, and tracking where they're trying to go and giving them all the support if you can give support at that point in time, because like you said, a lot of times you're just so sucked into yourself and trying to survive that it's really difficult to give any thought or heed to somebody else. But I think one thing that we can do is try to give people grace and check and see which way they're going and what they're trying to do, even if it doesn't look like they're on point from our direction or doing the same that we would do if we were in that situation.
I love that. It's beautiful. Thanks, Bruce. I, to your point, I think that we don't always have a lot to give, right? Sometimes our tanks are pretty empty. I think that it matters that we wake up in the morning and what we want in our soul is the best. You know, we want what's best. We want to give and help. We want a good relationship to ride. We want those things. I think that matters. Maybe some days that's all we can give. But I think that, to your point, that's where we are headed in that direction of that coordinate. And I just think that we need to be gentle with ourselves and acknowledge that if that's what we have to give that day, then we give that. And we feel good that we gave that. And then the next day, hopefully we have more, because some days, as a parent, some days, you know, I have a 4-year-old and a senior in high school and everything in between, junior high. Oh my gosh, it should be illegal. But anyway,
I only laugh because I'm not there yet. I probably won't be laughing nearly as hard.
No, you won't, but I still will. And I'll love you through it, Bruce, by giggling and reminding you that it is indeed funny. I would wake up in the morning as a mother and say, today I'm going to give my best. And sometimes that was my best. That moment was my best. It was downhill from there. But you know what? At least I woke up and said that, right? That was my coordinate. I acknowledged it. That's what I wanted. That's the direction I wanted to go. So, my goodness, let's be nice to ourselves. And then let's throw into the fray my fourth point. This is a tricky one. This is going back to what you had brought up earlier, Bruce, and that is there are some ancestral tides that flow in our lives. Tides that are handed to us from our family of origin that we grow up in, tides that they were handed from their family of origin. You know this, you know the story, it just goes on and on. The thing about tides is that they're not very easy to see and discover. And yet, they can suck you out to the open ocean and sometimes even to perish. And I'm speaking, you know, emotionally and mentally and spiritually. It's powerful. And again, if we don't have that coordinate fixed and our eye on it and our engines engaged towards it and listening to the computer speaking to us and responding in appropriate ways to that, our ship can just float amok. We find ourselves in some big messes and in some big storms and in some rough seas, like you said. So, what do we do with that? I think that we consciously engage and decide, make choices to learn, make choices to understand, make choices to be vulnerable enough to change, make choices to allow that of others that we love who are also riding our ship. And to be courageous enough to speak to each other with respect and to help each other be able to express ourselves. Like right now, I'm obviously, you know, with your significant other, I'm thinking of children as well who are involved in our lives that maybe don't have the ability cognitively to express their fears or express their experience or ask for help with the emotional chaos that's going on in them that they don't understand. To stem these ancestral tides, I think we have to be willing to talk a new talk and dance a new dance and to help each other do that. That can be really tricky. In fact, let's not, lie. It may be one of the trickiest things we do as we walk through our life. And never fear, because, we say, oh, I'm going to, do better than my parents did. And then you have children and realize that you have created work for some good therapist, as your children will need to go to them just as much. I mean, it just, no matter what you do, we are unconscious in so many ways. So there will be hurt, and that's okay, because those are the places where growth potential is the greatest. So as a mother, do I wish that I had not damaged my children in any way? On the surface, I would say yes. Inside of my soul, I recognize that those are going to be their places of greatest growth. And so in that perspective, I can rejoice with them in that, even though, I wish I had done better. And I think that the good news is that we have our lifetime to continue to work on it. And I know that there is a tendency to say, but if I just fixed this right now, or if I could have fixed this years ago, then I could have just, gone through life doing everything right. Well, I think that's a bit of a fairy tale maybe that we're thinking to ourselves, because life is never going to go just peachy. And on the other hand as well, I feel like if we spend our entire lives and wear our life out working on all of these issues, there's literally nothing we could have done better with our time. To me, that's the whole point.
The journey.
It's the journey. It's less destination focused and more journey focused. I'm having the experience. I'm building tools. I'm understanding new things. I'm thinking new ways. I'm dancing new ways. My resilience tool bag is growing. My resilience muscles are stronger. My resources to turn to are increasing. Those things matter. They matter, I think, probably more than we realize. So,
Go ahead. I was just gonna say that I just wanted to refer back to the point in the last video that we made. I have found it significant, and I'm bringing these things up because I struggle with them, not because I know that I'm good at them. But you were talking about being dragged out to sea and by tides and currents. And I just kind of feel that that kind of ties to what you were saying with that camp of righteousness or holding on to something that you know is right. And I think that if you can take a breath and just really think, I don't think it's ever easy, like you said, but to go through and just look at what you're holding on to. And if it's a destination that you feel is absolutely right, then maybe you can take a moment and see if the journey that you're on is still going to get there. And maybe you need to let go of that destination for a minute because maybe that's what's dragging you under and
mm,
making you be so hard on a spouse, a child, yourself, whoever. But like you were saying before, if it's causing you a lot of pain, then, and I just found that really profound. That's why I'd like to bring it up again, is just see what it's attached to. See what you're holding on to for dear life and find out if it's the rock at the bottom and that's why you're still underwater.
I love it. That's such a great visual. Yeah, yeah.
Because sometimes
We
if you
put
can
the
just
anchor
let
on our
go,
own feet instead
yes,
of the ship.
that's right. The anchor's gone, but I'm still trying to use it. And it's funny, but it's true. I think that a lot of times we can do that to ourselves, and sometimes it's not physically possible to hold onto what we're holding on to and keep going. And I think that, again, like you said last time, I just found it so profound to be able to internally look at that and take a moment and say, what am I holding on to, and is that what's actually causing the pain or the conflict?
I love that. And I also want to point out to us that, of course, we all have anchors around our own feet. We just
Yes.
do. Some of them we inherit, some of them we have crafted ourselves and attached them firmly to our feet
With care.
with care and intention. Anyway, so yes, we all have anchors on our feet, and yes, we all have the things that we struggle with. And that is not the bad thing. The bad thing, or the thing that damages us, is, as you have pointed out, Bruce, if we refuse to look and make a decision of if we need to free ourselves or not. I mean, we're going to spend, like we've just pointed out and brought up, we're going to spend our lifetime noticing, identifying, finding, uncovering, discovering, and recovering our anchors that we will need to snip off one at a time. I don't know, maybe there are some that have a few tied to one rope. I don't know. But I mean, they're going to pretty much need to be dealt with individually, and it will take our life. our lifetime, I mean, my goodness, I need to say that better. It will take our lifetime to do.
I didn't even catch
It
that
was
at
a
first.
faux pas.
Sorry.
It's like, sheesh, Tana, chill. That was a little drastic. Um, it will take our lifetime to do it. And I just want us to say, okay, I will take my lifetime doing that, because in the midst of that, I feel the more time we have that we can look around us and enjoy things. And it's just, I mean, our life is incrementally getting better as we go along. And that's worth it. That's worth it to me. Are you there, Bruce?
I am here if you can hear me. Let's just go ahead and wrap it up. I don't know what's happened, but hopefully you can still hear me.
So I think that we have lost Bruce. Anyway, I'll just wrap it up here and just say that, you know, whether or not our ships are traversing stormy, boisterous, difficult waters, or plying the calm, lovely tropical waters. I don't know what I'm saying. Or whether we're enjoying our time in, some port or in a coordinate anchor off of a shallow bay, that we would use our spiritual resilience engines to articulate with the coordinates that will keep our relationships healthy, well, and floating in good health. And I know we can do it. I know it takes work. And I know that we will learn and grow through failures and successes through our lives. And my friends, to me, that's worth it. And so, with that, please like and subscribe. Please be willing to bless and connect those in whose lives you are a part, those who are on your relationship with you. And we'll talk to you next time. Thanks.